going live. 8 viewers.
Now, am I going to see? There we go. That's what I need. I'm going to write, can you see me?
I'm gonna get off here and hang up the phone because you're live.
Okay. This is such a trip. I can't tell you. I'm so excited to do this. I've never done anything like this before. And man, I've been just started reading everybody. Man, this is cool. You guys are everywhere. Oh, this is roaring by. This is fantastic. It's me. It's guilty as charged. I was a little bit nervous yesterday, last night. The city where I live decided to take the area where I am and shut all the power off at 11 o'clock last night. So I was getting a little panicked about all this stuff. Let's see, can you describe the recording process during No Jacket Required? But seriously. Okay, I'll try to go through and address as many of these things as I can. First off, thank you all so much for coming here. This is really a trip. The closest I got to a club was being in the Cub Scouts, I think. So, and it's just cool to see where everybody's from. I'm reading down all through Europe here and Chicago. We got Chicago there and Florida. You're right near Phil Collins. You know, Phil's in Miami. And oh, Dennis St. John. God, I love Dennis St. John. I loved working with Dennis. Stockholm. Oh, God, Old Town Stockholm. Magic there. I was in the Girl Scouts. Good for you. I hope that was a girl. And Santa Barbara, nice. I'm going to be up near you guys on Friday. We're coming up to Oxnard to do a photo shoot with the immediate family at DW Drums. Did you ever get called to redo someone else's bass line? Yes. I've done that many, many times where I've been called into projects after they were finished and they were mixing and they called and said that they weren't happy with the bass part. Could I come in, learn the bass parts, and then replay them so that the bass player wouldn't know they had been replaced? Yeah, it's really kind of awful, but it does happen. If I look like I'm squinting and looking over, I'm trying to just see all these scrolls are really whipping by. Um, we're so excited. Yes, somebody asking if the immediate family's coming to Denver. Um, you know, everything at this point is predicated on really when it's safe to work again. We just don't know. I mean, the music industry right now is really in a very bizarre place because I had work going all the way from April through February of next year that all got canceled immediately. And my book went from being completely full to being practically empty. And that was one of the reasons when I was sitting here in the house and I kind of looked at how to still feel viable while all of this is going on. And that's when I posted a couple of videos of me playing with Phil Collins tracks. And next thing I know, it had blown into a whole other animal. And man, it is. I love it. Every day I get up. My schedule is kind of get up, walk the dogs, and come back, try to maybe do a little bit of yard work while it's still cool because it's still in the 90s here in Fahrenheit. And then I kind of go through songs, try to figure out what song to do, then learn them again because some of these I haven't played in decades, and try to remember stories. So it's become a real labor of love for me. I'm having a great time, and that's how this whole club kind of started out of that was because all I can do is read comments there and not really directly address things except with another thing. But let me take a quick look. Greetings from Seattle. I have so many relatives up in Seattle. I love it up there. Proper technique, no injuries. So injuries are a part of this. Liam and then Taylor, do you think NAMM will go on this year? I think they already canceled NAMM this year. Tomorrow I'm doing a virtual NAMM panel with Russ Kunkel and the sax player Mindy Bear, and we're doing that. But I think everything's going to be on hold for a while. Greetings from Zofret's bass, Zero Frets bass, cool. From Ventura. Yeah, I'll be, like I said, I'll be in Oxnard tomorrow, or on Friday, so that's great. Um, I would love to have a Delta Video and Storyman Jason. Delta Video in what way? I'm curious. Um, I don't. Here's one here. Troy. I never played with a pick. I started on string bass and never played guitar, so I've never really developed pick chops. But I love the sound of a pick. I mean, I have to give a great shout out to Carol Kay. You know, Carol Kay is like one of the great bass players, and almost all of her playing was with a pick, and I do love that sound. Um, Jason Crosby, did you play on that? Yeah, I've worked on Crosby's record. I've been working with Crosby and Nash mostly since the early days, and I actually met David Crosby standing at the side of the stage in 1968 in a place called Devonshire Downs in the San Fernando Valley, watching Jimi Hendrix play. And I looked next to me, and there was David Crosby, and we became friends. Oh yeah, Preston, Joe Osborne. Joe Osborne was one of the, I mean, these people, the Wrecking Crew musicians were the most remarkable musicians, and I felt so blessed that I was able to work with so many of these. Like Hal Blaine and I did tons of records together. Tommy Tedesco and I have done tons together. Took 2 lessons from Carol Kay about 20 years, and money was well spent. Walter, yeah, I mean, anytime you could, tap into the mind of somebody like Carol, it's great. Let me take a quick look. Uh, Here, Colin, did you track the but serious tracks that Pino and Nathan eventually played? No, we set those up for those guys in advance. I did all the other stuff, and then they came in because they had contacted Phil and just said that they would love to have a chance to play on the stuff. So I said, sure. To me, there's room for everybody in this. I mean, I love the fact that I got to be out there on the road with Phil and record with him. I mean, Phil is, a magical artist to work with. Give me a sec to look for some more things here. Um, yeah, Tala Peterson, says you and your dad look forward to seeing me at NAM. Yeah, it looks like NAM is probably not going to happen this year. Fudge sauce, great handle. Do you practice, or do you play for pay? And I practice pretty much every night. But what I do for practicing mostly is I take like tour tapes that I've done, and like I'll run the stuff. I work with Judith Owen, who's one of my favorite artists I work with, and I'll work on her songs. I pull out Toto stuff and play that rather than running scales and things like that. I really like to just keep playing songs. But during this period, the the issue is keeping your chops up when the work has disappeared. So this has been a challenge because when things start to open up again, you want to have your chops up, and so it's requiring some serious diligence that normally I was working enough where that was kind of how I kept my chops up. Quick look here. Yeah, Sarn, Phil Collins, the king of the 80s. Yeah, Phil is remarkable. Let's see, Sean, how did you make the transition as a studio musician to a touring play? As you've said, there are different roles. There was really no transition. I had always played in bands, and all of a sudden, when I met James Taylor and suddenly became a studio musician, unbeknownst to me, and then we started touring, it was really both just happened. It was not like it was a big deal to jump from one to the other. The thing that was good for me was there were a lot of guys who would say to you, how can you leave town while studio work's going on? And I'd go, well, I love playing live more than anything, so I would go on the road. But I was very professional about it from the standpoint there was a stable of producers that I worked with, and I would contact all of them in advance and say, look, I'm going on the road for this period of time. And sometimes they would move a project up in order to have me work on it. Or I would always start calling them like 2 weeks before the end of a tour. And there were times where I would land at the LAX and go right to the studio. And then during the kind of mid 80s, when things got weird because of synthesizers and everything, all of a sudden the guys who couldn't understand how I could go on the road were saying, "Do you hear, if you hear of any road gigs?" And I said, "They're covered. You know, most of the guys have them." But I like doing both if I can. I think if somebody, you know, twisted my arm and said you could only do one, I would be on the road. I prefer that over recording. I like the immediacy of, man, I boom, hit one note, you hear it, it's over with. Where in the studio you can sit and scrutinize that note for a week. So let me look for some more stuff here. Are there all the killer bass players out there? Would producers hire you? Um, um, Dougsdale. Of all the other killer bass players out there, why? You know, I don't know. I think I get hired for work because I have a really solid work ethic. I mean, I show up on time. If it's a 10 a.m. session, I'm not pulling in the parking lot at 10:15. I'm there at 9:30, and by 10 o'clock I am tuned, and if there's any kind of music chord sheets or charts or anything, I've already gone through them to see if there's anything I need to check out before we start. And then I guess they like what I do, you know, because there's a lot of bass players in town, and I feel really blessed to just to still be getting calls. You know, at this point in my life, I kind of thought I'd be out in the pasture, and you know, but if for some reason, you know, the calls, I had a bunch of work lined up in the studio, and studios are also pretty much shut down because of proximity. I was just in the studio with Judith Owen, but it was fine because it was just Judith and myself. So Judith was in a piano booth, glassed-in booth, isolated with her piano. I was outside the glass, you know, just listening through phones, and the engineer was in the control room. So we were able to do this without being, you know, on top of each other, where other projects would have been a little bit more, there would have been more concern about safety, because safety is a real issue. I know people that have died, you know, so I'm not taking this lightly, and it's scary as hell out there. So let's see, will you tour with JT and Jackson? You know, it would have been so much fun to have done that tour, but none of the old guys were approached by them. It would have been pretty much, you know, it's kind of like when we did the James Taylor Carole King reunion tour, which was one of my favorite tours ever. It would have been fun to have done a Jackson Brown James, since we were the guys that were there at the beginning for both of them. But it's their call, you know. I mean, it's, you know, but like when I'm doing the immediate family, I'm sitting here looking around the stage. Other than Steve Postel, the other guys, you know, Cooch and Waddy and Russ, we've been looking at each other for 50 years on stage together, and it's pretty fantastic. I mean, I love it, and I've known Steve probably for 12 years now, and I've worked on his solo album, done lots of projects, so we are having the best time. I'm going to try to find more questions here. The pocket is the groove, as the extreme rhythm section locks in. EU rig for Judith gigs. Can you really get? Yeah, Joe. The EA rig that I use with Judith it's a single 10, and the head and for what we do, it's a perfect setup. I actually, sitting in a chair, I can put the cabinet underneath my chair, and she's just playing, you know, electric piano, and most of the gigs are just she and I, or with Pedro Segundo on percussion, and it really makes for a beautiful thing, because the venues we play are, you know, small venues, you know, maybe at the biggest maybe 100 people or so, 150 people, but a lot of smaller venues, and it works great like that. Lee, do you tour with a bass tech? Ian, I had a bass tech on Phil's tour. I started, the first time I really had a bass tech was on the first Final Farewell tour with Phil. I've almost always done my own gear on the road. And Steve Winstead was my tech on that tour, and I didn't give him much to do, so he was frustrated. And actually, at the end of the tour, we had heard that Phil might retire, so I decided to take pictures of everybody just for a memory book. And And the first guy I went up to was Chinner, Steve Winstead, my bass tech. And I said, hey, man, give me a smile. And he was working on his laptop, and he just went. I took a picture of that, and that's how my entire collection of people giving me the finger started, was with Steve Chinner Winstead on Phil Collins's tour. And now I was up to about 11,000 photographs of people giving me the finger, and now I'm doing a coffee table book of it. And I think it's going to be incredible, because it's everybody you can imagine in it. You know, athletes, people on the street, musicians, all kinds of actors, characters. So it's really fun. But mostly I handle my own gear. I've always changed my own strings, batteries, you know, set up all my stuff, because I figure it's me on stage, and if something screws up, I want it to be my fault. Um, but had a really, really good bass tech out on Phil's tour on this one. He was great, and I just let him do everything because he really wanted to do it. So let me see what you got. Um, um, uh, 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 DM Levitt, why didn't you play on the Walking Man LP? James ended up doing that back in New York, and I think he got involved with David Spinoza and some of the local New York guys, and decided just to do an album that way, which was, you know, fine with all of us. You know, I was never, I'm not possessive about work. You know, I figure I work enough, and it's nice when other guys are working. So when he did that, we all went fine. And then the fun thing was learning what they did when we hit the road with James and playing those songs. So that was cool. That was great. Um, Give us all the finger when this ends. Why wait till the end, Tom? Come on. Now, this is always meant in pleasure and happiness. This has nothing to do, it's not like being on the freeway and a bunch of guys are in the car next to you all screaming at you and like that. This is, yeah, this is a little happier moment here. If I know, Dougsdale, man, the scroll up is unbelievable. Curtis, metal sculpting. Metal sculpting is one of the things I've loved to do more than anything, but I haven't done it since college. But I still have pieces at home that I made. I was like into kind of hyper fantasy realism in steel, and I loved it. But once music started, it became all consuming. Somebody earlier asked if I still play upright. I can fake my way through upright, but there's too many really great upright players around that really live that every day. So I'd rather just pass the work on to them. But I've got an electric upright and a regular upright here at home, and I play them. But when it comes to an actual recording session, I would really rather call some, like when John Patitucci used to live in Los Angeles, or Chuck DeMonico was still alive, I'd say, call them. I mean, they'll do a great job, you know, and I'd rather just come and hang out. Let's see. I was trying to avoid the heydays of the 70 drug scene. It's so romanticized. David Murray, you know, that was the weird thing. I was, in a way, fortunate that back when I was like 15 years old, 16 years old, I was in bands, and drugs were around at that point. And I had a really dear friend die of a meth overdose. I played a gig with Albert Collins, and when we left the gig, there was a park across the street, and I heard screaming coming out of the park, and I went in there, and there was a guy on an amazingly bad acid trip that I ended up sitting with all night until he was able to, you know, get himself together. But I'm really a type A personality, kind of a control freak, and that's, I think, what made me love bass so much. I always tell people, I said that the thing with, you know, because people would watch me like on the road, and everybody would be hanging out and goofing around and doing stuff, and I'd be sitting with headphones on working on songs, and they'd go, how come you're always doing that and we're, you know, eating dinner and all that? I'd say, there's really only one guy on stage that has to know the downbeat, and it's me. The drums can hit anything. They can hit the downbeat, but they could hit anything. But if the keyboard player, guitar player, if they're not quite sure where the song is at, they can kind of wait a second, if nothing else, and you wouldn't notice. If the bass isn't there for the downbeat, something's missing. So I'm profoundly anal about knowing my parts, and it was that way with Toto when I worked with them, and I only had the 5 days to learn their show. I just focused on it and spent every waking moment learning that stuff so that when I hit the first gig, I was confident. Because people that have seen the Falling in Between video, that was the beginning of the second week of the tour. I'd only been playing the songs a week when we did that video. I was still trying to learn songs in my mind. And Simon and I, like 2 months later, said, "Oh God, it would have been great to be filming now because we really had it down." Troy, do I own a Rickenbacker? Uh, no, I've never played a Rick. I really love the sound of them from everybody I've ever heard play them, but for some reason I'm not a real collector, so I kind of just have what I have. Is that cow sculpture, Tom? The cow in my backyard and the calf are fiberglass. It's all goofy. Hold on, Trey. So on the latest video, you see you with upright bass, but that was just for looks. Great. Yeah, that was. I just wanted to come up with something different for the video side of it. I could have played the part on it, but everything on the stuff. I mean, I play fretless and fretted, and I've got like a Washburn AB45 that I made into a fretless that sounds beautiful and sounds very kind of uprighty, and especially if I foam it up a bit and tone it down. But for the videos, you're always trying to look for something special. Steve, I've never worked with Billy Joel. He's one of the artists I've never worked with. I've always admired his work, but never had a chance to. Glenn, Lee, do you ever analyze your tracks in Pro Tools or notice things you don't like? But I don't really go back and scrutinize too much about stuff. Once things are done and I'm happy with it, I don't ever really check it out again. Let me see. Carol used to say that doing session work, she made more than the present. Well, the heyday of the Wrecking Crew, those people were raking it in. I mean, Hal Blaine would show up driving his 1934 Rolls Royce and stuff. It's another world altogether. Where are your gorgeous dogs right now? They are in the den just down the hall, sound asleep with the TV on. I love those boys. It was fun seeing Harry on Upright recently. Not in your league, of course. I love Harry. Harry's got so many qualities that are amazing. Yeah, if Yamaha was doing the reverse pickups, Joe, when we made that bass, the Frankenstein bass, I don't think anybody had ever done that at that point that I'm aware of. And I was sitting with John Carruthers and we just talked about it. And I thought that, by the nature of the G and the D string being higher register than the A and the E string on that bass, why not put the pickup closest to the bridge on the A and the E rather than on the G and the D? So, we just flipped them around. And it's amazing, but other people after seeing that started doing that, but I think that was really kind of the benchmark start of all of that. And I'm not going to take credit for anything. Do you follow symphony bass players? Thank you for writing Reinhard Abragamov, Leb 52. I cite Reinhard as probably one of my favorite bass players in the world, and I was going to do a tribute to him on my YouTube page. And Alina, his daughter, is remarkable. But Gary Carr as an upright player, there's a number of upright classical players. But Reinhard, to me, is almost in a league completely unto himself. And when I had heard that he had had a stroke and was no longer able to play, I thought it was one of the most heartbreaking things I ever heard, because this guy is unbelievable, and I will post him on YouTube so people can learn about him. But he was the principal bassist with the London Symphony Orchestra, and a monster. His facility is just so staggering, and his intonation and his flavor. So I'm glad you threw him out there. 52, great. Was the busy playing on Sussudio your idea, or did Phil put you up to? The thing is, the original Sussudio track is all synth. There's no live instrument on it. That was all done on a bank of synths. And I remember when it was finished, I looked at Phil and I said, "You really painted us into a corner with this one." And when we first started touring, I was using a couple of effects to try to allude to that. And we finally just got away from it and went for making it more organic. It's the only song in our show, pretty much, because Phil's shows are live shows. We're not like a lot of these acts that are out there that are just lip syncing to tape or some kind of sequence. But on that one, we play to like a filter track. So what's coming out of that track is just a thing going pow 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 pow, and I'm playing all the tonal parts. I'm doubling it with tone. But it's a bear of a part to play. But once you wrap your head around it, it's really fun, and I love that. The idea that we may never play that again, it just breaks my heart and terrifies me. I really hope that at some point Phil chooses to work again. I know that they're talking about Genesis going out. It was supposed to be later this year, but because of the virus, everything has been put off into next year, I believe. And then if once that's over, if Phil still wants to work, I mean, I would be there in a second. I love Phil dearly, but let me see. Let me look at some more stuff here, Brian. C. Kevry, Brian Wilson. Have you ever worked with him? I did an album. I did some Beach Boy stuff, but I did a really great record that was Brian Wilson and Van Dyke Parks called Orange Crate Art, and I loved it. I've been around Brian a number of times, and the brilliance of this guy is remarkable. And it's weird, I mean, he's really had a lot of struggles in his life, and so when you're around him, sometimes you're not quite sure how you're connecting, and then suddenly he's like connected with you, and you go, oh, cool. And I love the fact that I got to do like Wilson Phillips records. So I got to be around Carney and stuff. So it was like being that part of the family. In the same way, I was a massive Zappa fan. I love the Mothers. And there was a TV show called Happy Hour with Amit and Dweezil Zappa. And I got to be the musical director on that show. So it was kind of like coming through the back door to be part of the Zappa experience. Let me see. How often do you change your strings? It really depends on work, but I don't like new strings. So I tend to think like during the course of Phil's tour, we were out 2.5 years pretty much. And I would say we probably changed strings 4 times during the 2.5 years. At Tsuko, what made you decide to major in music in college? You have confidence that you would find, in college, I started in the music department and hated it. And after 2 years, I quit the music department and ended up taking some aptitude tests. And my highest aptitude was in art and science. So I left the music department and became art and science co-majors. And when I met James Taylor, I was actually thinking about becoming a medical illustrator at that point. And as soon as I started working with James, I thought I was going to do one gig with this guy because we had met, and they asked me to play at the Troubadour with him. And that one gig ended up becoming the rest of my life. And I left college after 5 years. I never had a degree, and somewhere in a microfilm file somewhere there, I've got about 250 credits sitting with no degree. So, but I had no expectations of becoming. I knew I would always play music, but I never thought it would be a career. Because like all the adults around you would always say, "When are you going to get serious and get a real job?" kind of thing. So, let me see. Flatwound, Brad. Flatwound. I've got a couple of basses with flatwounds, and I use labella on those. But for the most part, I've been with GHS for a long, long time, and I always I like stainless rounds. And my main picking point is I don't like anything larger than a 40 for a G string. And their medium light gauge is really great. It's 40, 58, 80, and 102. And they're super steels. And I really love that. I don't like going any bigger than 100 or 102 on an E string. I seem to get plenty of bottom end out of that without really having a cable sitting down there. And I can't remember exactly on my Dingwalls what the B string is. It's around, I think, a high 120s or something like that. Let's see. My thoughts on Jocko. I mean, I heard Jocko play live once with Weather Report, and he was just stunning. He was staggering. If you see the movie, it's about his life that Robert Trujillo did from Metallica. It's a great film and a tragic film. I mean, Jocko was really just a remarkable musician, but a tragic figure. And when he passed, it was like a Roman candle, kind of like Hendrix and a lot of these guys. They're almost like a Roman candle. They just burn fast and then they're gone. And I've always kind of looked at my career kind of like the tortoise and the hare, and I'm kind of content to be the tortoise. I've liked the fact that I've been doing this for over 50 years. You know, it's great. Somebody asked about Richard Marin. When I was in art at Cal State Northridge, in the art department, one of the guys I hung with was Richard Marin, who was Cheech of Cheech and Chong. And I remember one day him telling me, man, a friend of mine, we're gonna put together a comedy act, see how that goes. And I looked at him and said, man, good luck. And all of a sudden, they got the biggest act in the world, practically. Tony, do you usually, oh God, no matter what I'm doing, this damn phone rings. It's set for 2 rings. Stop it. My action on most of my bases is pretty high because I come from upright. And I told a story the other day about that on YouTube where we did an album with Mike Clark, who was the singer from the Hollies, the lead singer. And they brought in me and John Entwistle to both play on this track. And John tried to play my bass and I tried to play his, and neither of us could play the other's bass. His action is so low because his technique of this hammering and stuff. I mean, there's nobody. He had the most unique, beautiful style to watch. But I tried to play, and all I got was it sounded like somebody typing, and he sat there and tried to pluck one note and couldn't do it. And we just both laughed our asses off at that. We thought it was fantastic. Richard, Santa Claus, man. Well, yeah, I know you've been a good boy, so, you'll get what you want here. Let's see, basketball. The phone always goes off. I don't know, it's like somebody's waiting for me. I did work, David, I did work with Neil Diamond. I've done some projects with him, and I loved it. Neil is so good. He's such a great songwriter and such a great artist. I can't remember where. I'd have to dig it all up again and see what's up there. Marcia, Telly. The only Telly I know is Telly Savalas, so I don't know. Bill Thompson, thanks again for introducing Rebecca. Oh, God, man. Rebecca is one badass bass player. She is like so good. I'm going to post more of her stuff, I think. Let's see, could you do some of your film TV work? Yeah, I was going to go back to that because I did like most all of Mike Post's TV shows. So we did the themes for everything. I did Rockford Files, Hill Street Blues, the A-Team, Magnum PI. With some other people, we did Simon and Simon. Somebody was asking me about the theme to Alf, and I think there were 3 incarnations of that, and I was involved in a demo one for the 2nd season, and that had featured sax, and then I played on the 3rd season of Alf. But I'm gonna post all that stuff. The thing is, like, as I go through all this stuff, there's like, so many things that to post that I know I'm going to be busy for a long time. Like after this pandemic is over, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm enjoying it so much that I will make time. But the thing that'll be fun is once I can really be with other people, I'm going to do some YouTube stuff and have friends come over, like Waddy Wachtel or Russ Kunkel, and we can sit and talk and do all kinds of stuff. Hold on. Al Melcher, what was it like working on Stephen Brault's album? Stephen Brault is a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Is it Pittsburgh Pirates? Steelers. Pirates. I'm getting confused. Stephen Brault is like 29, I think, now. And I've done a lot of albums with ball players. The most amazing one for me was Bernie Williams, who was the center fielder for the New York Yankees, who is a monstrous guitar player, composer. And I've did 2 albums with him. But Stephen went through school as a theater arts major, and he also played sports. And so we went in the studio and we did songs from like Hamilton and Phantom, and this guy could be starring on Broadway. I mean, he's really, really good, and he's sitting with scores, reading them, and he knows what he's looking at. It was unusual because most of the time, the ball players, it's just kind of a hobby, but he's totally serious about. Let's see, Hill Street Bruce's best TV theme. Yeah, I think that was Larry Carlton played the guitar on Hill Street Blues. Lee, what do you think of our signature Lee Sklar bass moves? Fudge sauce. I don't know. I think where I'm really get noticed a lot is in how I move from part to part in terms of like glissandos and stuff. I'm not real cut and dry. I tend to be really greasy in my playing. And a lot of that is because I've had really some serious hand injuries over the years. And when I'm playing, this is my left, I'm not sure how the screen this looks, it's reversed here. But on my left hand, I hardly end up using these two fingers at all. Most all my playing is these two fingers because of injuries I've had in my hand. So when I watch some of these guys like Scott's Bass Lessons and different guys like that, and I see this facility that they've got, it's real difficult for me. So I kind of created a style that was built around my own inadequacies physically, and I've been fortunate that at this point, other than trying to play enough to keep my chops up, that I haven't been subjected to like arthritis or anything like that. But let's see, are you a Dodger fan? You know, I'm not necessarily a fan of teams. I'm a fan of great players. So, you know, I'll sit and watch anybody, and if they're playing great, I'm rooting for them. It's Trey, I call it smooth. Yeah, I mean, I've never really intellectualized my playing. I kind of just do what I do, and I get asked a lot of questions about what I'm doing, and I kind of really don't know because I get lost in the moment. I mean, like when I'm doing the YouTube stuff, my eyes are closed through most of those performances. And that's how I practice a lot of times. I'll go in a dark room and practice, just to be on the neck, you know, and not sitting there, you know, staring at it. Let's see what else. Elvis or Costello, Presley or Costello. I know Elvis Costello, but I've never played with him, and I never had a chance to play with Elvis Presley, but I knew all the guys, Ronnie Tutt and all those guys in his band. You know, I really would, Liam, it would have been fun. Steely Dan or Fagan, those are two artists that I would love, you know, those are two acts that I would love to have done work with, but never had the chance. Chuck Rainey did a lot of that stuff. Boy, this stuff's going by quick. Is that why you don't play a ton of walking bass lines? Well, Sean, it really depends on the material. If I'm doing a song that needs, like when I would work with Lyle Lovett, there was a lot of walking bass, and I would do it there. It just all really depends on the song and what's required. Trey, in the studio, are you the one first to lay down the tracks, or is it always? What I hope for in the studio is that I'm going to walk in a room and there's going to be 4 guys or 5 guys or girls, whatever, in the room. On Phil Collins's records, there's very little of us playing together. It's usually one part at a time. I think one of the only tracks we really did was there was that tribute to Bernie and Taupin and Elton John album, and Phil was one of the artists on it, and we did Burn Down the Mission, and we cut that the basic track. Phil actually laid down a piano part and then played drums, and myself and Daryl Sturmer played that. But when we did But Seriously, I was one of the first people in. Phil would lay down a guide drum track and maybe some keyboard chords, and then I would come up with bass parts, and then Daryl Sturmer would come in afterwards and do guitars, and then eventually Phil would go back in and then redo what he had programmed with real drums. The thing I miss is Phil is still one of the best drummers I ever played with when it comes to feel. And if you go back to Brand X and stuff, I mean, it's remarkable. Let's see. John, none of the basses have a maple fretboard. You know, I'm not a gearhead. I really don't care. It's like if somebody put a gun to my head and handed me my Frankenstein bass and said, how many frets are on this bass? Or we're going to shoot you. I would be laying there dead on the floor. I actually have never counted them. I always kind of go, enough. I'm not at all a gearhead. I've picked up some basses at flea markets for like $75 that I'll play. If it sounds good and feels good, I'll play it. And I've had a couple of very expensive basses that I played for a little bit and immediately got rid of them because I just hated them. So the money's not a part that comes into the consideration. It's really what feels good to you. And when guys are always asking me about what bass should they get, I go to Guitar Center or someplace and try a bunch, see which one you like, because everybody's different. That's the thing that's beautiful about the arts and in general is it's all subjective. I saw something go by there. Do you have a turntable, Curtis? Yeah, I have a turntable and I still have a bunch of vinyl. I'm just going to sit here and squint for a moment. I just came, oh God, hold on. Let me see, that one just kind of roared by. Let me see if I can. I just came home after 7 days in the hospital. And oh man, wish you all the best, Sean. And it's tough. I know a lot of people that are dealing with issues health-wise that are not all COVID related, but I'm glad you're home after a week. That's great. And it's Tom. How was the transition from you to Jimmy Johnson? Was there? The thing was, in '89 we did But Serious with Phil Collins. In '90 we went on the road from January to December. It was a year long, and about 3 months into it, James chose to start working again, and James Taylor. And so they needed a bass player for it. And Jimmy was a friend of mine. And also at that point, Carlos Vega was the drummer on it. And Carlos and Jimmy worked a lot. So we just thought Jimmy would be the logical guy. And that kind of, once Jimmy started with him, that's kind of where James decided to stay. And Jimmy's done a beautiful job on it. They've made great music. It was fun going back to do the James Taylor Carole King reunion tour, because then we had the absolute original band from 1970, which was Russ Kunkel, Danny Korchmar, myself, and Carole King played piano with us. And during the course of James's first gigs, nobody knew who this young girl was sitting at the piano, Carole King, but so many people knew who the songwriting team of Goffin and King was, who had written like The Locomotion and all amazing songs. And so we encouraged Carole to step out from, sitting as a side person and do some of her stuff. And she ended up opening shows. And the next thing you know, Carole goes in the studio and cuts Tapestry. And so all of a sudden we have a band member who's got like the biggest record in the world. So at that point, Carole had to move on. But when we got together for the reunion to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Troubadour, which was where our first gig was, it was really, there's always that old adage of you can't go home. Well, we actually got to go home and it was bitchin'. We had a ball. The hardest part of that whole thing was putting together the set list, because the way we always did it with James was we would get 3x5 little cards and write song titles on them. And we'd lay them on the floor and we'd have like up-tempo, ballads, blah, blah, blah. Between James and Carole, we probably had 500 cards laying on the floor, and we were going to have to narrow that down to about 30 songs. So it was a lot of work putting that set together, but playing it was the most cathartic show. Just looking at the audience, we would have like 3 generations of people in the audience all singing together, crying, because those songs became such parts of people's lives, benchmarks for births and deaths, marriages, divorces, any kind of event in life. There was songs in there that could really impact them. So we did that tour, and that was fantastic. And then the only other time we did something for James was when he was honored by the Kennedy Center, and the original section got together, and we performed at that for James. And Sheryl Crow sang with us, who was a huge James fan. So, but we're all still friends and everything. It's just there's a finite amount of work in the world. Oh, Trey, it says thanks so much for the chat. See you tomorrow. Trey, man, thank you for coming. This is great. Let me look down here and see. Let's see what else we got going on down here. Yeah, I've done the bass player, Bill Thompson. Yeah, I've done bass player live at NAMM. Steve and Victor seem to be the stalwarts, though. Yeah, I would do those, but I was like, man, to me, when they have like those super jams at those things and all the bass players are up on stage, just tearing it up. if I go on stage, I go right to the back of the stage and look for a groove and keep playing the groove. I'm not going to step out to the front of the stage. It's not my comfort zone, and it's not what I really enjoy doing that much. So it's fun to sit there and watch O'Teal and all these cats get up there and just rip it up. But I'm content. I did a bass trio with Jonas Hellberg, Steve Bailey, and I called Jostle, and we did that through Warwick. And I told him I would be happy to do it if I just get to play bass and you guys take all the solos and stuff. And it worked out great. We had fun. Let's see. Um, did Broadway Joe, did you use your piccolo bass on Only a Dream? No, I think on Only a Dream in Rio, I think that's Tony Levin playing on that. I mean, I played on the record, but I think he played on that track. The piccolo bass I've used on a number of things, but I always use it for like just pure effect. Oh, Bill, yeah, Jostle was cool. We had a great time doing Jostle, and at the end of it, we also had Alfonso came and was playing with us too. So it was just fun, and we would just play stuff like that from Spectrum. I would start Stratus, and then the guys would jump in and do all the heads and stuff. Let's see, Sneaky. Would love to see you at Tanglewood with JT. I would love to go back to Tanglewood with James again. And every time I've done that with him. Yo-Yo Ma comes and plays, and he is a trip. I've got a great picture of Yo-Yo giving me the finger, but let's see if I've got one here. I don't have one hand. But Yo-Yo's going like this, and he's holding a scissor, pretending he's cutting his finger off. I mean, this dude is a character, but one of the greatest musicians to ever draw breath. Curtis, how about a solo album? I have never had a desire to do a solo album. I really enjoy other guys' solo albums, but I'm really at my best when somebody calls me and I get to come in and contribute to their projects. That's really my happiest time. But the pressure of going in and coming up with all my own stuff, I'm just not at it. Let's see what we got here. Pad, ever play piano anymore? Not really. By the time my piano time was over when I was 12 years old, I was really burned out with piano. I was like the proverbial child prodigy, and I'd won these awards from the Hollywood Bowl Association and got to meet Eugene Normandy when I was like 8 years old, who was the great conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, because I started when I was 4 and I was a classical snob. But by the time I was 12, I was pretty toast, and so I was very grateful when I went into junior high school, assuming I would be the piano player in the orchestra and stuff. And they had plenty of piano players, but Ted Lynn, who was the music teacher, said, we need a string bass player, and he pulled out an old blonde K upright from a back room, and I put it against me and plucked a note and felt that vibration run through my body and said, sold. And never look back. I mean, I can play around on piano, but it's not something I'm driven towards, because it just some weird memories come back with that. Frankenstein was built. Were you not? No. Actually, hold on. Let me see. Yeah. Paul. Paul. Well, it's Paul Williams. I love working with Paul Williams. I was really content. My first bass was a melody bass, a Japanese bass. I was probably about 15 or so when I got that. And then I got an Echo bass because I was such a McCartney fan, but I couldn't never afford a Hofner. So Echo was kind of one of those cheap knockoffs on it. And but my first real bass, I got my hands on a mint 62 jazz bass, candy apple red, had all the covers and everything, and picked it up for $90. And which $90 at that time in my life was a lot of money, but I mean, you look back now what those things go for. But when I've shown in videos my Peace Love bass that's all carved up, it was that bass, and I love that bass. I still play that bass. Frankenstein was a project, and it could have sucked. It could have turned out really bad, but the main hold on one sec. Love, Crow Twist, any other immediate family? Oh yeah, Richard. There's a whole bunch of immediate family stuff. We're working on a new video right now. The album. There's going to be an EP at the end of in late October, November, and then the full new album will be coming out at the beginning of the year. Everything was pushed back because of the pandemic, and we had gigs and stuff and touring to do, and everything's kind of on hold. And Denny Tedesco were going to try to line it up with the documentary movie being filmed about us by Denny Tedesco, who did the Wrecking Crew movie. But the great watering hole back in the 70s in Los Angeles, into the 60s, was Westwood Music for musicians. You'd go in there and Ry Cooder would be hanging out, and Jackson Brown, all these different people. And John Carruthers ran the repair department, and I ended up with a neck, and I've done a whole video about that. But the Frankenstein just turned out to be a great instrument, but I've got a number of other basses. I've gotten rid of a lot because I'm not a collector, and I think it's important for an instrument to be played and not just sit in a case or in a closet. So I've unloaded a lot of stuff. But let me see what else we got. Anyone you haven't recorded with it? It's like there's I mean, when I end up having to look at my discography, I'm shocked sometimes how many people. But there's people like Steve Winwood. I never got to play. I've never played with Winwood, and I'm a huge fan of Winwood. But there's so many people that, I was a massive Joe Cocker fan. So when I got to start working with Joe Cocker, I was like, you put the headphones on and you go, it's Joe Cocker. One note, it's Joe Cocker. These people that have such a signature. Willie Nelson, one note, and you're with Willie and Streisand and these people. Thank you. Let's see what else we got here. These are still going by quick. How does the music business work with touring? Are musicians paid by? Every gig is different. Some people, when we were out with Phil Collins, we just get paid weekly. We have a weekly set fee for the tour. Some guys get paid by the gig, but sometimes that can backfire on you because you think, oh, get paid per gig, and then suddenly you find out you're only doing 3 gigs a week and you're sitting on your butt for 4 days. So that's not smart. But everybody's different. In the studio, some guys do single scale, some guys do double scale, depending on, what they can command, or they have set fees. It's all gotten very different over the years, too, because there used to be pretty much standard things, and now everything's become independent contractors. So you're kind of having to, like people will call you and say, yeah, every phone call about indie projects starts with somebody going, we have this budget issue. Of course you have a budget issue. Everybody's got a budget issue. And then, they ask you, well, what would you charge me for this? And you tell them, and they kind of go, oh my God. And, and you go, that's not as much as I was making 10 years ago. Give me a break, don't go, oh my God. It's like, when the plumber gives you a quote for, copper piping your house. You're a professional, and you do what you do. And there's been times where, it's probably the most difficult part. Making music's a whole lot easier than making the business side of it. That gets sometimes very uncomfortable. Let me take a look here. Were you in, hold on. Yeah. Hearing that you played with Paul, did you play in the soundtrack? Yeah, I played on Phantom of the Paradise. I worked on that, and I did all of Paul's early records. And Paul and I are still very dear friends. I love Paul. Let me see. I know you're not a gear hound, but have you seen Geddy Lee's Big Beautiful Book? Yeah, his book is fabulous. In the same way, Billy Gibbons' guitar book is fantastic. Yeah, they're good. Geddy really put together a beautiful book there. Yeah, somebody wrote God bless Fred Wallachy. Yeah, Fred Wallachy owned Westwood Music, and Fred's still doing great. He went through a throat cancer, and so like when he talks now, I want to interview him, but I'm not sure how well that'll work because he's got a bad thing because I removed everything in his throat and all that, and he talks like that. He's a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to try to get together with him and do something. It'll just be one of these things that requires a little more patience. But man, Fred, was music. I never got a chance to work with T-Bone Burnett, Helen. Love his work. He's done great stuff. Seth, any progress on the coffee table? It is coming along. It might actually be done by the end of the year. We've gone through and categorized. I'm working with a guy named Blue who does art books. And he put together a whole concept for this where I turned over like 11,000 photographs to him, and he just started wailing on it. And it's going to be great, I think. I think it's going to be so much fun. And I'll keep you all posted on it. It's a trip. It's one of those things. What the hell? Why not do it? Everybody's bugged me for so many years. And so I thought now is the time. First off, there's such an aspect of now is the time, because like when I was like 23 or 33 and all that, and we were out on the tour, you looked at that calendar and it looked like it would went on, you know, it was like the horizon line was down there. But at 73 now, I kind of look at the calendar and go, even super healthy, there's kind of a finite amount of dates left on this thing. So I'm packing in everything I can. And so to do this book, I thought if I don't do it now, I'll never get around to doing it. And but you know, and that's why I'm doing like all kinds of things like this and a lot of Zoom interviews and stuff, just trying to get information and stuff that I can still remember out there. Let me take a quick look. What is the first really huge show you ever played? How did you feel? Were nerves ever a factor? I've never been nervous, but I get anxious, excited and anxious. I try to be as prepared as I can so that when we hit the stage, I'm confident in what I'm doing. But still, there's something just thrilling about walking out onto a stage and having an audience. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I've played, we did the first Rock in Rio festival, and there was, hundreds of thousands of people there. We did a gig with James Taylor in Central Park where they said they thought there might be 1 million people at this gig. But I feel exactly the same way if I'm playing a pub and there's 30 people in there, and I'm not BSing. I really do. Because generally, no matter how big the gig is, there's a finite section of that audience that you can actually connect with, and that's about the size of a club. So that's who I focus on when I'm up there, because the rest of it becomes like a patchwork quilt of color. When you have these blankets of people out there. But I get really excited about it. I want to get out there and play. I really hate sitting around. Though to me, the time that's the worst is you finish sound check and then you're waiting for the show. Because sometimes you've almost blown your wad in sound check because we want to play so much that we get out there and we just kick butt. And then all of a sudden it's dinner time and you're suddenly going, oh God, I'm kind of full now. I really shouldn't have eaten that big a dinner and all that. But it's, anytime I can put a bass in my hands and look around and see people I dig with me, I am a happy camper. Look for some more questions. What was it really? But the first really huge gig, I'm really not sure. Time is, the first big gigs were, I think probably one of the first big gigs I played was when I was in this band Wolfgang, and I've played some stuff on YouTube from that band. And I was just walking my dogs the other day, and Lenny Goldsmith, who was one of the singers in Wolfgang, drove by and stopped, and turns out he's just moved about 5 minutes from me, and he sang with Tower of Power and stuff. The guy's a monstrous singer, great keyboard player, so world's really small. But the first gig that we ever played as a band was opening for Zeppelin at Winterland. So, and that was in 68 or 69, so it was a trip. Let's see, what do we got here? Nick, what was it like working with Joni Mitchell? Joni is such a fascinating individual. Her talent is like, peeling an onion or eating an artichoke. There's just layer upon layer of this woman. It could be exasperating because she was so focused on what she was doing that sometimes you were trying to tap into it and you really weren't quite getting it. Wasn't expressed how you could get it. And other times things would fall in, but the adventures she would do in music were staggering. And when she, played with Metheny and Jocko and these guys, you just go, man, she's remarkable. There's nobody like Joni. And when I work with Judith Owen, that's her favorite artist. And it was great at the last NAMM show. I was working at the Tech Awards. They gave us an award, and I got to be one of the hosts on it. And Joni was being honored, and Judith came back to the dressing room and got to meet her and was so thrilled because that's one of her absolute heroes. Let me take a quick look. What are some of your favorite fuzz bass performances? Oh God, I love fuzz bass. Fuzz really seems grit and bass. Not being able to pick any specific, I just love the sound. Fuzz bass has been used a bunch of times on different things. And I always enjoy it. When I did Steve Lukather's, I think it was Ever Changing Times, and one of the tracks we did was Jamming with Jesus. And we overdrove the bass like it was like completely distorted, fuzzy. And I love doing that. I mean, and I love hearing other guys do it. If the song's right, man, go for it. I mean, McCartney did some great fuzz stuff too. So let's see. Let's see, Lee, if you get a chord chart, this is Fudge Sauce. If you get a chord chart, do extensions affect your note choice when creating a bass line, or are you just thinking about the essential chords? Um, I really fly by the seat of my pants when I'm doing any session or any stuff. I've never really played anything twice the same way. So if I look at a chord chart, I'm not really kind of using that as to define, like roots or anything. I'm looking at that as just as places I'm going, and I like the adventure. And so much of that really came from starting with James Taylor, who always has a moving bass line in his guitar playing. He's probably one of the most underrated guitar players in the business. So I had to figure out how to swim around him and justify my gig being there. And so it really opened my ears to really approaching everything when I'm looking at a chord chart, or even when I'm looking at a note chart. There's so many times where I'll talk to, I'm going to get some WD-40 after this, and this chair's a little squeaky here. Where I'll make octave choices. Like a lot of times a bass part will be written, lower octave, and I'll just go, no, this is like a first verse. It really needs to be up high. That's how I came up with the part for the theme to Diana Ross's, the theme to Mahogany. I always forget the name of it. I was just call it Mahogany. But Hal Blaine and I were like the fourth or fifth rhythm section to be called in. And everybody had played the parts low, and I started the whole thing way up at the top of my neck and just let it build down into the song. So it's kind of like, let's see, I vote for Jack Bruce on apostrophe. Yeah, Jack Bruce. I vote for Jack Bruce for damn near anything. The first time I met Jack Bruce, I was like just going, oh man, this dude. Because they played when I was in college. Cream came and played in the gym, and I walk in there and they opened their set with Tales of Brave Ulysses, and I'm sitting there and all the hype was Clapton. He's God, he's this and that. And as soon as that opened up and I hear the I look over and I go, oh crap, he's singing. And I thought, Jack has like that operatic voice, like Bob Mosley from Moby Grape had that same kind of voice. Jack to me is like just one of my favorite all-time bass players. That whole period of players was just great. James, is there a big difference recording in Nashville as opposed to LA? Yeah, I think Nashville is, in terms of their scheduling, or at least was, because I went there all the time. I spent like 10 years in Nashville going back and forth. They really function on that 10-2 and 5 or 10-2-6 sort of mentality of blocking their days out. Like the guys go do a 10-1, head off to another session, do a 2-5, and we're in LA. Most of the time the sessions were loose. We'd get booked for a day, and we just work until we were done. Sometimes we never took breaks. They were pretty adamant about breaks in Nashville. It was more kind of union driven. The quality of players is staggering down there. I mean, so many great players. I spent so much time working with Eddie Bayers, who was one of my favorite drummers, and Paul Lime was one of my favorites. When Paul lived in LA, I actually recommended him for James Taylor, but he had young kids at that point, and our touring schedule was rough, and Paul passed because of family, which was the right thing to do for him. But Larry London, there's so many great players down there, and Michael Rhodes and Mike Brignadello, those guys are all I love those bass players and stuff, so it's really cool. Have you ever done any? But yeah, I worked with Amy Grant. Did her album that was a hymn album that she did, and it was really fun. I love working with Amy. She's an absolute sweetheart, and she and Vince together are a total trip. But in terms of there is a big difference between LA and certainly there's a difference between working in New York and Nashville and LA. Each area has its own flavor of how they. The process goes. I like LA's just really loose as a goose. We just just go in and do it. I mean, I was doing one session with a guy, and we finished at A&M, and I was there from 9 in the morning till 5 o'clock. Walked out into the hallway getting ready to go home, and there's Herbie Hancock sitting there, and he goes, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm done for the day." He goes, "You want to work?" And I pulled my gear across the hall and went in and worked with Herbie. So you just never know. Um, yeah, Seth Paul, what a great player. Yeah, he's Paul Lime's a monster. Can you explain the number system in L.A.? Plant spoke of it too. Yeah, Helene. Yeah, what they do. I mean, when I got there and I saw that, instead of like if a song's in C and stuff, you got a C written down. But in in the number system, it's a 1, and then if you go to an F, it's a 4, and G is a 5. The thing that's great about that is many times when we got in the studio, they hadn't sorted out the key yet with the artist. So all of a sudden, if they say, "Well, we're not going to be in C, we're going to do it in B flat." Well, B flat is 1, and then E flat is 4, and so it made transposition really, really easy as compared to sitting in your head and trying to transpose like up a third or down a fourth or whatever. I love the number system, and generally the music is not so complicated, because we've had some number charts that say at this point the 5 becomes the 1 of the new key, and you get into this whole juggling of that. It can get a little squirrely, but as soon as I wrapped my head around it, I thought it was great, because if you don't know what key the song's going to be in, it makes jumping into the song really easy. Just knowing that 1 is whatever the key is going to be. Let me take a Curtis, Herb Alpert. I love Herb Alpert. I've spent like years at A&M, and actually Herb was interested in playing with the section early on. He wanted to sign us to A&M, but he really wanted to be a part of the group. And whenever I see Herb, man, he's just a dear man, a brilliant businessman, musician, humanitarian. He's as we say, the shit. He's really the shit. Let me look at some more here. Love the number system. You can play. Yeah, that's great. Can you please describe the sound while playing on stage at a huge arena or stadium? It really depends. First off, like with Phil Collins, our stage rigs are all small. And literally, I could talk like this to Daryl Sturmer on stage, and we hear each other fine, even if we're playing in an 80,000 seat stadium, because we've got a monstrous PA system. And the one thing I think guys need to learn is when you have a PA system and you have a good front of house guy, let him do his job. Don't be so damn loud that your fader is off, coming off, you're so loud coming off the stage. Let them mix the show out there. So we kept all of our gear really small. Now the issues come, like the other part of that question was, like when James, in the early days with James, we'd play like a lot of college field houses, sports setups. And the real problem with those a lot of times is the way the stage was set up. Like the bleachers were up on the side and seats on the floor. You're playing to a flat wall at the other end. So you're playing and man, you're getting bounced back like crazy in there. And that can be really exasperating, but there's really nothing you can do about it except wish that the place had spent a little more money and hung a curtain on the end instead of having a cinder block wall facing you. But for the most part, we've always tried to keep stage levels down to levels where we could really relate to each other musically on stage and not be battling away. And this is a thing we've just been going through with the immediate family, is getting a balance between 3 guitar players on stage. I mean, Russ and I, Kunkel and I sit in the back, and we've got our scene going on back there, but we've got, Steve Postel, Danny Korchmar, and Waddy, and trying to get a balance between them. And in this last period of time, we've finally really nailed that, where the vocals are really working and the guitars are working. But it's different. Every room you walk into has its own dynamics and its own kind of idiosyncrasies that you have to deal with. And let me see what else we got. Love number system. We can have the sound on stage. You played Running on Empty, an A on the record, but in G on Jackson West. The thing is, as a lot of these artists age, you're going to find yourself lowering keys for them. Most of them, end up doing it to a certain extent. I remember sitting with Phil Collins, and you know, and we like I think it was, I forget which song it was early on, but we immediately lowered the key like a half step when we hit the road. And he said, you know, I always forget that when I'm in the studio doing the song, that's the only song I'm doing that day. And so I can put my all into it. But suddenly we were out doing 3 hour, 20-minute shows. And you go, man, this is too much for this. By the time you're getting to that song, your pipes are hurting. So there's most artists that I know, certainly of in this age group, have lowered songs, and sometimes they've lowered them to the detriment of the song because they've lowered them so much that it's turned into another animal. But sometimes a half step or whole step ultimately doesn't really dramatically affect it. And other times you just go, you know, forget it. You know, let's just not do that one. Let me see. Dougsdale, what's your daily ride? I'm still driving a 1997 Chevy short bed regular cab pickup truck. Haven't washed it yet this year. It's funky. It's got just enough, you know, like when I got my truck, the first thing I did, and I've been driving a truck since '65. I'm a truck guy. I like being able to throw my gear in the back. I like being able to go pick up a bunch of river rock to do some landscaping, or pick up sod or a truckload of compost and do that. But so the first thing I do when I get a truck is you look at that beautiful bed, and the first thing I do is I slide a railroad tie in it and scrape the whole thing up. So, and then I put a rubber mat over it just so things don't slide around and have a spreader bar in it. But I'm a pickup truck guy. I really like it, and I look at the new trucks. And I just hate them. You know, the '97, that period of Chevy bodies was still, the Silverado was a good-looking truck. The new ones all look like some kind of weird little cousin of a Peterbilt. They're trying to make the fronts so massive on them, but it's a bunch of plastic and crap. And if you got in an accident, that thing would fold up like a tin can. So I had a '92 Chevy pickup exactly like mine, and I was doing a direct-to-disc project for Doug Sachs at Bill Schnee's studio in the San Fernando Valley, and came out and looked at the parking place, and my truck had been stolen while I was working, and so I ended up, you know, collecting the insurance on it and then getting kind of a duplicate of it, except in '97 is when it happened. So, any memories of playing with Clarence White? You know, I loved playing with Clarence. Clarence, man, was such a beautiful musician. And we were right in the middle of doing his solo album. And that's when he was hit by, you know, he was changing a tire, I believe, on his car, and somebody hit him and killed him. And he was a young man, and but yeah, his guitar part on Jamaica Say You Will. Clarence was a beautiful, beautiful musician, and I miss him. Yeah, Arnold McCuller has been Scott, Arnold has been a consistent touring mate of yours with James Taylor for Collins. Tell us about that. Arnold, I love Arnold McCuller. Arnold is such a character. You know, I've been with Arnold since, I think he joined James probably around '73, started working with James. And then he started with Phil, I think it was in '90. Because on the No Jacket Required tour, Daryl Sturmer and I did the background vocals on that. But God, this things are going by here. Did you ever work with Arlo Guthrie, Jim? Yeah, I worked with Arlo Guthrie. Did an album with Arlo. But Arnold, I love Arnold. He's consistent. He's solid. He works his ass off, and especially when we were out with he and David Lasley together, we're really a magical team of vocalists. And then Rosemary Butler joined up with them, and it was something else. Let's see. Eric Benson got a run. Eric, take care. I'll see you next time. This has been great. If you want to see Lee's musical CV, go check out his Wikipedia page a lot there. Thank you, Martin. Have you ever used in-ears, Sean? I tried in-ears and didn't like them. You know, I know there's been improvements on them, but when they first started, you know, like you'd try to talk to somebody on stage and you'd finally get their attention. They're going, oh, what, excuse me? And I like the interchange, and plus I like sound pressure on stage. I like amps, man. When they talk about, we'll remote your amp off and you can just do in-ears, I go, ain't gonna happen. And on Phil Collins's tour, there's like 15 musicians on stage, and I'm the only guy with a wedge on stage. And anytime anybody walks over and stands in my spot, they all go, "Oh man, this is great." I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It felt more like I was in the studio wearing them. I've had to use them, like when we do the Grammy pre-show and some of those kind of things. You have to wear them. When we did John Lennon's 75th birthday at the Garden, I had to wear in-ears for that because we were getting lots of cues in the in-ears for things. So you had to be able to listen. That couldn't come through the wedges. But I'm still, I'm still pretty much old school when it comes to all that stuff. Let's see, what steps have you taken over the years to protect your hearing? My hearing has suffered, and if I get in a restaurant and there's a lot of talking going on in there, and I'm sitting at a table, sometimes it's a little bit hard to hold up with the dialogue, but it's done fairly well. The thing I think that's probably hurt my hearing the most was my proximity to cymbals. When a drummer's there's no prep for that. It's just suddenly it's there. Where with the guitar players, you might have a little like tinnitus effect by the time that the gig's over just from that. But I think most of the damage might have been from cymbals. But we've always tried to keep the levels down and stuff. So let me look for more questions here. If you only changed strings 4 times in a year and a half, did you boil them? No, I just pulled them off. And what I do with a lot of strings at times, like there's the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, or the school. I'm in Pasadena, California, and there's a great music school here, Lama, or whatever. I forget what they're calling Lama now, but that's where Joe Picaro was and stuff. It's Joe. But like I would end up with like lots of strings, and I would just take them over there, and people would take them and use them because strings. They're expensive, and you just don't. When you're starting out, those are expenses that sometimes you're looking at strings or a meal. So any stuff I can give away like that and give to the school or something like that is always great. And then there were some people that I was sending them off to that were doing jewelry out of strings, and it was great to send them the strings so that they could make bracelets and necklaces and stuff out of that. Yeah, crash cymbals are the bane of bass players. Yeah, Martin, that's for sure. Richard, no, I was not in the Wang Chung video, but I sure was a fan of Wang Chung. I thought they were great. Let's see some people signing off here. Ever break a G string on stage? No, I never broke a G string, but I did break a D string in the very early days with James Taylor. And we had no real techs, so the guy who was mixing monitors, I gave him the bass while James told a story, and I said, "Can you just throw a new D string on it?" He didn't know really what he was doing. Hands me the bass back. I now had an A string tuned to a D. So G was fine, A was fine, E was fine. When I went to play that D string, it was like my fingers were playing a cheese slicer, a thick cheese slicer. It was horrible. Why wasn't I on Machine Gun Kelly? I was on Machine Gun Kelly, I think, on the original. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. I thought I played that with them. But I've played it so much, it's hard to know. Let's see. When I started out, I used to boil. Yeah, a lot of people boil strings. There's a lot of different, ideas about what to do with strings. What was the stage volume with Billy Thorpe? That's another discussion. Billy Thorpe, man, that was one of the loudest things I've ever been involved with. As a trio, we filled an entire semi with the 3 of ours gear. And the first time my bass rig got set up, it was set up at the front of the stage, being confused, thinking it was the PA system. And I said, no, that's the bass rig. And I just ended up selling a huge chunk of that rig. Klipsch built the speaker system for that, and I was running these 1,000-watt mono Altec power amps for the 2 bass bins, and had 4 Yamaha P2200s. Billy had a huge stack of Fender stuff. I mean, it was amazing, but I loved Billy. Man, when we did Children of the Sun and went out and played that, it flipped people out. And the thing that was great about the bass rig on that thing was that when we played the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, everybody in the front was happy. People about 20 rows back were looking really distressed because that's about where my bass waveform crashed. And I was using like Taurus pedals, and I had Bob Easton's first 360 system synth bass set up for my bass, and this a friend Wayne Yentis had built this whole pedal board where I had a transposition pedal where I could hit my low E and drop it 2 octaves, like at 104 dB. I mean, it's total madness. Um, do you have when you say, Richard, do I have Twitter? Am I on Twitter? I'm on Twitter, but I don't like Twitter. I hardly ever go there because I'm way too long-winded for those short little bursts of talk. But I'm always being thrown off of Facebook like I am now. I've still got another 20 days before they're going to let me back on. Any memorable mistakes on stage, Harry? You know, generally there haven't been too many errors in judgment. There were two things that happened. I remember when we were playing with the section, we were doing a gig, and I had a bass solo in the middle of the show. And by the time I finished my bass solo, I forgot what song I had come out of to do the bass solo and went into the wrong song. But thank God the guys were on top of it, and they just looked at me and went into the next song. Um, but I'm trying to think that there was another incident. Um, if it comes back to me, I'll get in there. Could you put could you put Low Down Payment by Crosby Nash on your YouTube channel and explain the time scene? Yeah, I'll have to go check that out. There's so many songs that people are writing to me about, different songs, and man, I've really got to go back because so many of these I haven't heard. You know, it's like when we did Spectrum, when we cut Stratus, we figured out, the groove, we sorted that out quickly. And I think that's like the first or second take, and that's the only time I had ever played the song. And all of a sudden, as time went on, every band, every guy was out there doing those songs. So if I made the mistake, I'd go in the studio and go, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Man, guys would go, let's play that. And I go, I actually don't remember the head. Or it's like the guy who knew the song the least because I had played it the least. So many of these songs that I'm going back and finding are really, so old. And I'm trying, and I'm trying to be true to them, but I'm taking some liberties with them because I'm not going to sit there, like I said the other day, and karaoke my way through them because, I'm going to play them the way I feel them to an extent now because I'm not, I'm like running them one time, relearning them before I do the video because I still have lots of stuff I have to do. So I can't sit there all day and relearn songs note for note. So this is a challenge, man. I'm digging it, but it's some are really easy and some like I'm going to get back in and dig into Rosanna and a bunch of Toto stuff, and there's still some other Phil stuff that I want to get into, and so I'm going to find that. Mr. Sklar, will you ever make an appearance on your Mrs. Sklar? It's fudge sauce. It's up to her, I mean, she's got her own life. It's like if I say, "Do you want to come in the video?" She, "Oh, I gotta go get make." I'll pitch it to her and see if she wants to do it. Uh, when you do background vocals, do you do second or third? It really depends what's needed, and I have more than anything, I end up doing high falsetto rather than lower parts. For some reason, I can hit falsetto parts, so I end up doing higher parts. Um, Janine, she will not share her chocolate cake recipe. My wife entered her scratch built chocolate cake in the LA County Fair, which is the biggest county fair in America, and won the blue ribbon 4 times with it. My teeth get pimples. It's so good. And then one of the things that they said at the fair was, it's about time now that you put your recipe in our fair cookbook. And that's the last time she entered the fair. She also won the blue ribbon for her carrot cake, which is unbelievable too. And she makes probably the best oatmeal raisin cookies I've ever had. And they're like this big. They look like manhole covers. Thelonious Jasmine was they with JT Winter 70 at Little Rock, Arkansas at the Barton College. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I remember playing there. I think they had a rodeo in there just before we got there. But yeah, I remember that gig. How was playing with Leonard Cohen? It was amazing. You know, I mean, first off, it's Leonard Cohen. I mean, you're dealing with another iconic character, and you know, you walk in the studio, and as you walk in, I go, there's Leonard Cohen. In the same way I felt when I worked with Andy Griffith. You kind of walk in and you go, wow, that's him. That's really him. And one of the things we cut with Leonard was the song Always, which I just posted Phil doing, which was one of the most beautiful renditions of it. But with like Leonard, it was slow and he'd be going, I'll be loving you. Oh, I mean, it was like this low, resonant, vibrating. It was like I was going, this is a trip. This cat is, oh man, a trip. Let's see, neuropathy. I take Norco, helps a lot. And neuropathy is a huge deal. That's been dealing with that for a long time, really profound. Did you play Michael Murphy's Wildfire? I can't remember. I worked with Michael. I can't remember which one it was. My wife wants to join Mrs. Sklar's Club. Oh, yeah, maybe she'll end up doing that. It's Opie's dad. I'll tell you, I mean, if you didn't hear that, when I was in the studio with Andy Griffith, at one point he's sitting there, because we did these two gospel albums, and he ended up winning like Gospel Album of the Year, won a Grammy for it. But he's sitting there, and it was like after Matlock, and he had this thick, beautiful white hair, and he looked at me and he goes, who would have thought I'd still have all this white hair and Opie be bald? Man, I almost fell off my chair. I was laughing so hard. I mean, that's like one of those things you just go, oh, man, well, why wasn't somebody filming this one? Let's see. Let's see. Can you consider do I don't want to know from no, don't want to know anymore on your YouTube? Yeah, I don't want to know anymore. It's great. I'm trying to find. See, I'm running into issues with all this stuff where you run into copyright and all that. So I'm trying to find versions that I can get through without having the copyright police jump down my neck. If I can find one that I can do that to, it's one of those songs. It's a great song. There's really not much going on because most of that song, when I did it live, I did it on Taurus pedals. I doubled my bass part with Taurus pedals, but it was really that deep Taurus sound that you hear mostly on that, and on especially on the But Serious tour. I had my Taurus pedals set up, and there's another set of pedals that I have in my gear video by a company called Fast Forward that are MIDI step pedals, and I was using a Proteus 2 Brain on that, and I would use that stuff for In the Air Tonight. So the Proteus, the MIDI pedal had an infinite hold button, so I would do like this low sub note, hit that button, and then I had those on a volume pedal, so I could have that running for 10 minutes. And then as soon as we came in, you know, with the big notes on In the Air Tonight, I would play it on the bass, step on the volume pedal, and step on my Taurus pedals. Had all three coming out, and man, shake the building. It was so bitchin'. I haven't finished Phil's book. I read some sections of it. It's really hard for me to hunker down. I'm too ADD to read books often. As soon as I start reading, I find myself distracted and thinking about other things to do. I want to pick up the audio version of it so that I can do other things and listen to Phil tell it, because I'd like to hear his voice anyhow. It's been cool hanging with you, Victor. Yeah, it's great with all you guys. Talk about cruising versus touring on the road. I'm not really sure. Cruising, you know, I mean, I love going cruising. Touring, you know, I spend all my time on the road when we're out there, always out exploring towns and stuff. I figure the great advantage of this job has been the travel, and I can't believe musicians that go on the road and sit in their hotel rooms and don't take advantage of every town they're in, go find museums and, fun streets with all kinds of, junk shops and stuff, botanical gardens, cathedrals. I look for everything I can. Fudge sauce. I've never played guitar. I have no facility. I don't know how the hell anybody plays guitar with those little strings so close together. Did you ever work with John Densmore, the Doors drummer? Yeah, I did the album Full Moon. I worked on that, which was the album the Doors did after Jim Morrison passed. So I got and I've known John and all the guys for years. What is the donor block on your hot? My hot rod is still sitting at my mechanic's friend's house because we had to recore the radiator, and the only people that seemed to be capable of doing it were up in Paso Robles, California. So we shipped it up there because it's a 1923 T, but it's got 1,000 horsepower small block in it. It's a 355 that's been all tweaked out by Gale Banks Engineering out in Azusa, California. And in the car only weighs, it's like a smart car, it weighs like 1,500 pounds. So when I get it back finally, I'll do some videos with that and I'll show you. It's a beast. Thanks, Lee. When is the next time? I meant to check with people. I'm going to put a feeler out. If it's easier for people, like in Europe and stuff, if we do this earlier, I'm flexible with time. This was the first one, and we just kind of picked 4 o'clock. We thought that might work. But if maybe like 2 o'clock or something like that would work better for people, let me know, because I'd be really happy to adjust the time that we do the next one. But there will be a feeler sent out with all the information on it. Let me see. My cousin has a teapot that he races. I've never raced because the hot rod. First off, I don't want to break it because I don't want to spend any more money on it than I have. But I grew up at drag racing and stuff, and I love it. But the car doesn't really have safety gear on it that would be required to take it to a track, and I don't have a roll bar or seat belts or anything, so I'm the tallest thing in the car, so if it ever flipped, I need to be thrown out of it, otherwise I'm the roll bar. Hold on one second. So your friendship with Bob Babbitt, Troy. I loved Bob Babbitt. Bob Babbitt is, he's right up there with Jamerson and Duck Dunn and, all those guys. His parts are so exquisite. And he was the sweetest cat in the world. I've definitely got this in the book from Bob. Yeah, when Bob passed, it was another one of those really heartbreaking things as these people go. When Hal Blaine passed, I spent so much time with Hal, and it just absolutely broke my heart. Oh yeah, Peter. Yeah, full circle. Did I say full moon on the doors? Yeah, I don't. I'm just talking off the top of my head on so much of this. Yeah, the radiator has an electric fan on the thermostat, but I can run it independently. Like when I shut the car off, I leave the fan running for a while just so I can cool off a little bit. I have to jump out and get some dinner. Bob, have a great dinner. Thanks. Did you ever meet or play with David Gilmour? I know David Gilmour, but I've never had the chance to play with him. That's another cat I would love to play. I would love to have played with Gary Moore. Gary was one of those guitar players that you just kind of go, wow. Time to fix my dinner for my wife. Oh, great. All you guys, man. It looks like a lot of people are getting ready for dinner now. It's 2:27 here in Sweden. A little earlier would be nice. Great. Yeah, we'll talk about that and try to get a time that works for everybody because there's so many time zones involved here. And plus, all of this apparently is going to be archived, and so any of these can be viewed anytime once they're all set up, and that information will go out too. How tall are you on stage? You look like the tallest there. Just a shade over 6 foot. But a lot of the guys I work with are kind of 5'9", 5'10" in that area. But and then I had a great pair of platform shoes back in the day that made me about 6'5", so that was really great. It kind of felt like Mick Fleetwood. Nothing more interesting than playing with rock stars and just recording and all. In the radio. Yeah, it's all great. Man, I'm a grease monkey. I do love cars, and I've gone through a whole bunch of them over the years and realized it's really a rich man's sport and get rid of this. So I passed them all on to people that could restore them and do what they did, and I just kept the hot rod. It's really fun. Ken, I met my wife in college. We were both in the art department together, and she was like I'd watch her walking down the hall, and I go, she's a babe, and she's a sweetheart, like one of the kindest people I've ever known. And it turns out that we've shared so much in common from the standpoint, first off, love of animals and all that. And the fact that she was never a drinker or did drugs or anything, so we weren't dealing with that kind of a dynamic. But this December will be our 50th wedding anniversary, so she's very patient. Have you played with Tom Schultz from Boston? No, I love Boston, and Tom was a great guy. I used to have one of those Rockman or whatever little thing he made. He was a smart cat, but I never got a chance to play with him. I heard you like junk stores, Marshall. I love junk stores. My house is like packed was stuff. Is Vince Gill as nice as he seems to be? Sean, he's nicer. I love Vince. Vince is just a joy to be around. Um, he's just a brilliant musician and a great cat. Um, did I play on the Tarzan soundtrack? No, I didn't. I ended up touring the gigs, but that was a whole different production team and stuff. Oh, yeah. Thanks for the Mike Reno songs. Man, Mike Reno, man, when he came and see, we were so disappointed that the label decided they wanted another Loverboy album after we cut that stuff. Because man, Reno, there's just those guys, like when Steve Perry would be in the studio and just open his mouth, you go, man, I dig this cat's voice. And Reno was that way. Any kids? No, we never had kids. I've always been content with dogs and cats. And for my lifestyle on the road, it's hard. It's hard on them. Lee, are there any songs that you would take back? No. It's real interesting. There was a thing, I might have mentioned it before, like Ask the Experts or something, like on the guys on Bass Player magazine, and they did a whole thing about asking all these different bass players what they would do different or take back. And all these guys were writing, all these things about things they would do different. And it got to my name, and I'd said nothing. Because, I'm proud of, if, some things are, silly or whatever, but they've all had a place that's gotten me here. And so I don't really regret anything. I maybe regret that I hooked up with some people where I got ripped off and never got paid for their album, when they bullshitted me and sent me like bad check or something like that. But those are few and far between. For the most part, I'm happy with, all the people and projects I've worked with and the diversity. I think the thing that's kept me engaged is the diversity that I've experienced in this business, so that I could go from playing something like Stratus to playing It's Raining Men, it's I Am Woman to Another Day in Paradise, and all the movie and film scores. So, let's see, what do we get here? We're probably getting close to the end of this. It looks like so many people are going to dinner. What are your thoughts on recording Gorilla? Oh man, well, Gorillas, that was a great period with James. All of James's albums were really beautiful experiences in there, and Gorilla, I loved it. Pretty much my favorite James Taylor record was Flag, and it was probably one of the least successful, and it's probably because it didn't have a picture of James on it, because everybody liked to see James, and they just put a nautical flag on the cover, which I think was the nautical flag for Man Overboard. But man, the studio experience with James was always great. I loved it. Let me see. Thanks for the live stream. We got to go walk the dogs. Yeah, I'm going to take my boys out in a while too. Hello, another Swede. Yeah, I love Sweden. God, any of today's smoothie left? Yeah, I got enough smoothie for tonight and for kickoff tomorrow morning. Thoughts on Phil Lesh? Yeah, Phil's great. Phil's one of those guys. Phil Lesh from the Dead. It's one of these guys that's had adventures with it. It's not traditional, bass playing on a lot of things. It's a lot of real interesting, spin on it. I mean, I love the bass community so much because to me, there's something to learn from everybody who picks up a bass. From dealing with the Jocos and the Victor Wootens and Steve Baileys and all these monstrous facility players, to the most basic rudimentary players. There's something to be gleaned from everybody on it, and I'm just always been really proud to be a part of the community. It's really a real special breed. Let me see if there's some more questions. Can you talk about your work ethic? Well, I mean, to me, I try to treat this as it is. I try to be as professional as I can while being having fun. I mean, they call this playing, but it's a profession. And my work ethic is always, you're on time, you pay attention, you give your best. When you're in the studio, when it's time to listen to a playback, you're not sitting in the studio on your phone, texting. You're in the control room listening to what you did and what the band did, and you make suggestions. You become engaged. You're part of the scene. And for me, a lot of times it was also sort of a cheerleader. trying to keep energy level up, and keeping it light and joking and stuff, but not to a distraction. But and on the road too, you're always prepared. You're always ready. You when it's sound check, then you don't want the production manager or something looking around an arena to figure out where the hell you are. I mean, you're on stage. You know what time you have to be there, and you're there ready to play, and you do your job. Let me see if there's any quick ones. Tony, Tal Wilkenfeld is not a flash in the pan by any means. I've known Tal since she was about 15 years old. She's a remarkable musician, and she's really very quickly made a place for her. And I think as she ages, she'll mature into a really great place. But she certainly is like one of those wunderkinds. But I sit there and I watch like YouTube. You see like this 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds that scare the crap out of you in terms of their facility, and you just go, wow. But no, Tal's a great player, and the work she did with Jeff Beck was great. In the same way, I mean, when Rhonda Smith took over that seat with Jeff, Rhonda's a monstrous player. She's there. I'm really enjoying the fact there's so many great female bass players out there, because I mean, it was other than Carol Kay back in the day, it was really kind of the dudes world, and there's so many great female bass players, and I love what they bring, their sensibility and their ideas to it too, because they're another creature altogether, and it's really fun to listen to them. Antonella Mazza, who I've become friends with through Warwick, is a wonderful bassist, and she's a great upright player and electric player. Let me say. Love Tal was a successful first streaming. Thank you again. Thank you guys. It's been amazing. Someone to lay down beside me is one of my favorite guitars. Yeah, it's beautiful. Aaron, the bass player, is the one. Yeah, that Aaron is ridiculously good. I've met Aaron, and man, a sweet kid, and has an amazing future ahead. Playing as a profession, do you generally create your own bass parts in the studio? I would say probably 85% of everything I've recorded, I've created the bass parts. I'm really happy to walk in and see a chart, with parts defined, because it really makes my life a lot easier. All I have to do at that point is interpret them rather than making them. And it all works for me. From nothing, from going in and having a guitar player sit down and play guitar, and me figuring out a part, to them having a chord sheet or charts written out. I'm happy with any of it. As long as I'm working, I'm happy. Esperanza Spalding. What do you say? I mean, she's a genius. I mean, she is a remarkable. I've hung with her. And beyond being like a monstrous player and great singer, she is a beautiful, beautiful spirit, and just a treasure to be around. Yeah, she's something special. Yeah, Mono Neon, Seth. Yeah, I really dig him. I dig the whole persona that he's created. I mean, I have no clue what the dude looks like, because every time I've seen him, it's like all this stuff going on. But plays great. Plays really great. There's a bunch of players that I'm gonna try to honor as many players as I can on my site, because to me it's my site, but I represent the bass community, and I think we all deserve some moment. Do you get paid extra to make up your ideas? No. I mean, that comes with the territory sometimes, and sometimes it's frustrating, because your bass part might define the song, but you're not getting writer's credit for it. But you can either whine about it, or you can just go, it is what it is, and that's I'm not going crazy over that. Let's see. Have you ever used a pick? Talked about that earlier. No, I'm not a pick player. I didn't ever play guitar. I started in an upright, so I'm a fingers player. I saw something about Ingwe that went by here. I'm just trying to say, there. Yeah, Malmsteen. Yeah, all those guys. All these great, kind of shredders and stuff. Satriani and Vai and all these guys. I enjoy them all. I spent so much time with Lukather, and Luke is just one of the great beasts in this business, and I love him dearly. All those guys, Greg Nelson. Yeah, I've worked a bunch with John Jorgensen. John's a great player. You got to add a lyric to get a writer's credit. Yeah, yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, it becomes it's up to the artist too. They could credit you, but it doesn't happen. There's something. Liberty DeVito always talked about creating the parts and hooks that made the song and not. Yeah, I mean, all of the players I know, go through that. I mean, you create. There's so many records I've done where the artists are never there. We come in and we make all the tracks and do all the stuff for them, and sometimes rewrite the songs for them. Come up with a bridge or an intro, and we don't get the credit. But life isn't always fair, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's something that I've been dealing with for a long time. Yeah, Luke is a one-off, a special person. Yeah, sorry about Judith's dog, Doris. Yeah, Judith Owens' lab just passed, and she was such a sweetheart. She used to come over to the house and have doggy play day with my guys, and I loved seeing her. And Judith is really in a state of devastation over this. This was her soulmate, so my heart's with her. And yeah, I know. Sean, I know Jacob Collier, and Jacob is another one of those things. I mean, I think he's really almost like savant-like. I mean, everything that guy touches, he plays great. His concepts musically are just staggering, and I sat with he and his mom, and we saw Tower of Power and Royal Albert Hall together and stuff. But Jacob is amazing. There's so many, what was Recording Flag like? Well, all of the things were great. I mean, James would come in with great songs, and we had a great band, great engineer, great studio. So that the experiences were always great. It's very hard to go get very specific about them because so many of them. I mean, at this point, I mean, theoretically, I've worked on like 2,600 albums, somewhere in that range, and trying to glean specific information at times gets kind of hard. Let's see. I hope you had as much fun as we have. Thanks for a great hang. You did a good job. Thanks, man. Yeah, I need to call it a wrap. I can hear my dogs outside the studio, outside the door. They want to go outside too. Thank you all for coming here. This is really a unique experience for me. I've never done anything. I mean, when I'm sitting doing my YouTube videos, it's just me, and then I read comments later. But to actually have things flying up here in real time, it's a trip. And so I thank you all so much, and we'll kind of sort out the time thing and see if it works better for people to make this a couple hours earlier for the people in Europe for the next one, and we'll sort out the day as best we can, and then I'm going to go out and do some work. And I'll give you a quick view. This is when I talk about working in the yard. Here's my patio right out here. See, I don't know if you can see that. This is just, this is where all roses and stuff are. Just a bird just flew off. This is where the dogs hang out most of the time. So, let me put this camera back here. There. So I'm going to get out. It's cooled off enough where I can take the boys for a walk. And then I'm going to go out and do some yard work. I can hear somebody scratching. Well, actually, I'm going to introduce you to the dogs right now. Let's see who's here. Hold on just a minute. Who's here? Here's my boys. That's Marcello and Rossano. Okay, I'm going to have to get off now. Okay, guys. Thank you all, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Now I got to figure out how you shut this thing off here. Oh, yeah, I see. Stop streaming. Tomorrow I'll have tomorrow I got all these other things going on too, so tomorrow's going to be a real full day. I'll figure maybe I'll do Rhinet tomorrow and show you Rhinet or Bragamov. So take good care.